I'm Molina Ciocia. Thank you for listening to my presentation. My research seeks to find to what degree Romanian media rediscover and legitimize diasporic communities as a cosmopolitan alternative to Romanian society modernization. My analysis of diaspora articles in the most important Romanian newspapers, conducted throughout 2009, questions the power of the press to cultivate cosmopolitan attitudes and sensibilities. Despite contrasting visions of a global community, the concept of an international civil society is very much the talk of the day. Whether globalization is a continuation of modernization or a postmodern stance involving the loss of national perspectives, it follows that all concepts pertaining to modernity should be revised. The ideological deconstruction should be accompanied by a new critical theory which might well be cosmopolitanism. In creating this new loyalty, emancipation is a significant process, emancipation not only from space, but also from time and collective memory. A cosmopolitan perspective would need to build a moral authority, which some researchers believe to be that of universal human rights, but also open up new negotiation spaces and strategies. Part of the problem in trying to seize the loyalties of citizens towards a cosmopolitan ideal lies in the disjuncture between the imagined community of cosmopolitans rejoicing the advantages of globalization and the real community of disenfranchised nationals who do not partake in this utopian world of wealth. One solution would be to allow imagination to play its part in designing new patterns of collective life. Within this frame, research of social build-ups would play the part of imagination going practical. In this respect, we intend to analyze whether the Romanian media build a potential cosmopolitan space by involving the public's imagination into a project of value redefinition. If a cosmopolitan community is created in the diaspora which is likely to trigger changes in the cultural practices of Romanians, do the media identify and acknowledge their capacity to direct voters by means of a mechanism of association with cosmopolitan values and sensibilities? Do the media regard the diasporic community as a mere electoral tool or as a decisive agent that will influence the political options of groups of voters, especially young ones? Before Beck, cosmopolitanism departed from the natural order of local attachment. Beck claims that cosmopolitanization means internal globalization. In this respect, we should understand that the geocultural locations of modernity are reinterpretations of natural allegiances. On the continuum from close localism to close cosmopolitanism, of interest for this paper is banal cosmopolitanism. This form of low globalization could shape the cosmopolitan society by means of a narration which in time could create loyalty, very much like loyalty to localism. Questioning the value attached to inherited principles, the cosmopolitan creates culturally significant practices which constitute the system of meanings required to validate cosmopolitanism as an ideology. Diasporas propose complex identification geographies. Their actors are cultural citizens with shared loyalties and conflicting identity. The person in the diaspora is closer to the idea of multiple modernities. The diasporic identity is inclined towards reflexivity and dialogue. Consequently, it participates in shaping that mutual understanding which allows cosmopolitanism to work. If the diaspora can imagine a form of cosmopolitan culture, this mutation of values is likely to reflect in the cultural pattern of the community of origin. The issue of media morality is worth investigating as well. Cosmopolitanism involves permanent negotiation of difference. Media play a part in this negotiation. Media are able to build empathy between local and distant communities and nurture attachment to cosmopolitan identity. The media appropriate the reflective instruments needed to turn spectators into an active, conscientious public. But increased connectivity between cultural fictions of various communities does not trigger the creation of a mutual ideology and instruments for making that ideology live. It is the shared meanings that build solidarities. To what degree do Romanian media answer these constraints? I conducted an analysis of diaspora-related articles in important Romanian newspapers and revisited two of them during the presidential elections. The inventory of diasporic stories proposed to the Romanian public outlines a far-off, violent, victimized diasporic world in tune with clichés of the foreign press. The coup de théâtre denouement of the president elections in December 2009 has forced an answer from the media. Since it was the diasporic community that triggered the upheaval of results, the issue of this not to be ignored variable rose again. It was the diaspora that decided the president of Romania by voting massively with the candidate of the right-wing Democratic Party, while the exit polls indicated the victory of the left-wing candidate from the Social Democratic Party. The question asked was whether this decision was based on values arising from the cosmopolitan experience of the voters. The proximity of the journalist to the diasporic community is essential for understanding the topic. The journalist fakes objectivity and distancing, but this mock-up objectivity leads to labeling the diasporic community as an isolated, immovable, deviant world. The journalist selects sensational or grotesque elements, hoping that they talk for themselves. The setting is that of violent events which construct a distorted image of the diaspora. Another relevant item is the journalist's approach. Assuming the position of reporter of witness would ensure the appropriate degree of objectivity and would furnish enough credibility for readers to build empathy with the diasporic community. Our analysis revealed exactly the opposite. The refusal to zoom in leads to breaking up any fertile two-way communication between the diaspora and the national public. The individuals are rarely compared with other people abroad and are mostly typified as victims or violent scoundrels. They do not have a voice, they are merely silent extras in a violent world. Part of the aloofness is owed to improper use of sources. Most often, the journalist prefers the telegram style, making a summary of news from foreign papers. This aspect can partially explain why the journalist rarely proposes a moral of the events. Most articles go as far in their ambition as to merely inform. Journalist attitudes during the presidential elections are highly relevant as well, since the public discourse took over the idea of the key role played by the Romanian diaspora and even the more upsetting idea of a country split in two, the loyal nationals who voted left and the distant Romanians who decided the destiny of millions back home. The newspapers should have reflected and commented upon these ideas. However, the analysis reveals that the newspapers were quite late in including the perspective of the diaspora in the story. The victimization discourse of politicians lends several themes to editorials. It is not the political allegiance of the diaspora that made them vote for the right, but a conspiracy of manipulative politicians stealing their votes. They are perceived as victims, not illuminated actors fighting for a representative political body. On the other hand, foreign journals tackle the position of the diaspora in the elections from the perspective of conflicting ideologies. Being more familiar with the benefits of the liberal economy, the people in the diaspora voted against communist reinstatement. The Romanian journalists do not go as far as to express these opinions themselves. We now come to the conclusion of this analysis. If what the Romanian journalists propose to the public back home is a violent, victimized diasporic world, media reports will not lead to the creation of cosmopolitan sensibilities. Us and them will remain two communities isolated in their own prejudice, and the much coveted for-value transfer will not take place. Consequently, nor will the cosmopolitan attitudes of the diasporic community have an impact on the national community. We are then back to the deadlock in analysis of the kind. It is difficult to propose instruments by means of which the national media could build a cosmopolitan perspective for a national audience, and it is infinitely more difficult to expect that this cosmopolitan space will grow into an alternative public sphere that would in the long run contribute to the formation of a global civil society. In this respect, Beck's argument for cosmopolitanism as a new critical theory that will refute methodological nationalism makes sense. Thank you very much for listening to my presentation.